In this video, we're going to talk about all the things that const can do for us. And so in order to do that, we need another file. So I'm going to go into index.html. I'm going to change the src from while loops to functions. All right, we're going to talk about functions. And then what I'm going to do is I need to create that functions.js, right? So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to new file, and then I'm going to go to functions.js and then press enter. So to demonstrate what const is, we need one. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable using our let keyword. And I am going to call this variable radius. And you'll see why in a little bit. And I'm going to make that radius equal to 4. All right. Now I am going to declare another variable, but instead of radius, instead of let, what I'm going to use is const. I'm going to use the const keyword. And what const allows us to do is it allows us to create a variable that we are not allowed to change. So I'm going to go ahead and create this const variable. I'm going to call it pi. This example, it works really, really well, but it's used quite a lot. That pi, the number you multiply by the diameter of a circle to get the circumference, that is always 3.14159 and some change, right? So this number doesn't change, and to not allow our program to change it, I am going to use the const keyword. So let's see how this works. Let's see what happens in action. So I am going to take my radius, and what we learned from the operations video is that we can change the value of radius. So let's add 1 to the radius, and so now the radius is 5, right? I am going to console.log that, and let's go ahead and make sure that everything I've done so far works. So I'm going to go to my code projects folder, and I'm going to go to index. I'm going to open it, see nothing, go to the console. Right here I see 5. Great, that works. I'm going to go back to Atom, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to change pi. I'm going to attempt to break math. So I'm going to say pi is equal to pi plus 10, something, right? We're going to change it to another value, and I want you to see how the browser is going to react when I try to run this code. What is it going to do? So I see this error. So you may have seen this before, but when something is wrong with your code, this red box can pop up in your console, and it's basically JavaScript telling you, hey, there's something, we can't run this code, and here's why, is basically what that is. And so I see type error, invalid assignment to const pi. So I can never make an assignment to pi after declaring it. So you see that I declared pi, and I'm trying to change it. You cannot do this, all right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to not change pi. So now that I've done that, let's go ahead and talk about other things that you can use const with. Because why would I introduce this? This seems like a bad thing, right? It's actually a very good thing, because sometimes you just don't want your variables to change. Here's another thing you don't want to change. I'm going to go ahead and create what's called a procedure or a function. I am going to create a function, and I am going to create it like how we create other variables, right? And I'm going to call this function find radius. Now don't be thrown off by me typing this in a different way than how we normally type it with underscores. This is just the name of a variable like any other name of a variable that we use, okay? But when I assign something to this, I'm not going to assign it a value or a string like what we did before. It's not going to be a number. It's going to be a procedure. It's going to be a function. And so the way that we create functions is by putting 2 parentheses, an equal sign, followed immediately by a greater than sign, and this is an arrow. Okay, so we call these arrow functions sometimes. And then after that, I'm going to press Shift and then open my brackets and close my brackets. Now, what this code means is that I am creating a procedure. I am setting that procedure equal to whatever I define here. And so these parentheses determine what the input is, defines it as a function, and then what my output is, okay? So this syntax might be intimidating, this way of writing it might be intimidating at the start, but if you get enough practice with it, it shouldn't be that bad, hopefully. All right, so now inside this block of code, I'm going to do something, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to output what my radius is. So I'm just going to console.log what my radius is. And then I'm going to make this look nice. I'm going to add this to a string value, and I'm going to say the radius is, and then I'm going to say radius. Okay? Adding that to a string. Okay. So now that we've done that, we have to do one more thing to create a function. We have to do find radius, open parenthesis and close parenthesis. And what this does is this actually executes our function. Okay? So we have a function, and then we have a way to execute it. Okay, so I've done a lot without running the code. So let's go ahead and run the code and then see if it works. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to my... Okay, so now we say the radius is 15.70795, right? Cool, so we have just created a function. We've created a function that calculates the radius. So that's really nice, right? Let's go ahead and create another function. So I'm going to say const, and then I'm going to say find circumference. Okay, so this is going to be another function. This is going to be equal to, and I'm going to create a function, right? And then I'm going to use my arrow, and then I'm going to open my parenthesis, close my parenthesis, and then I'm going to console.log what the circumference would be. So what the circumference is, to not get too much into math, is pi times the diameter. So the radius is, or sorry, the diameter is the radius times 2. So this is going to be radius times 2, which is the diameter, times pi. Okay? And I'm going to add that to my string, and all I'm going to say is the circumference is that. So I'm actually going to lowercase that. Okay? What am I missing? I have to actually call the function. So I declared the function, I have to call the function. They call that calling the function. So I'm going to find circumference, and then I'm going to actually execute the function. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and run this. Okay, again, the circumference is, and then what the circumference is. That's nice. So why do we care? Like, why do we want functions? Why is this good? Why don't we just console log what we want to console log? Well, the nice thing about functions is that you can use them as many times as you want, right? So let's say that we want to change the variable. Let's change the variable radius, and I want to say that the radius is equal to 12, something else, right? After I do that, I can now execute my find radius and find circumference functions. And then I will get a different result. And I also want to console log what the radius is so that we can be really clear about what we're doing. And then we are going to put the radius. Okay, great. So now I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to my output. So now that I've changed the radius, 12 times 3 looks about right. So then we got 37.6 and a whole bunch of change. And then the circumference is going to be 75.3981, whatever it is, right? So these are different, right? And sometimes we just want to be able to quickly change the radius and then get different values without having to retype this, because retyping this would take a lot of, take a lot of extra time on our hands, and now our software is more useful. Our software is more easier to change, easier to work with, right? So that is const. What I want to do now, I want to just sort of exemplify what this is, the reason why we make this const. So I'm going to say I'm just going to say find circumference. This is a variable, just like any other variable. The only difference is that it's a constant variable. But let's say I want to say find circumference, and I want to make it a number, or I want to make it a string actually. Let's say this is a string now, haha, right? And then I go ahead and I try to run this. Well, what's going to happen? Uncaught type error, invalid assignment to const find circumference, right? So it's a variable just like any other. The reason why we make it const is so that we're unable to change it from this procedure, from this function that we want it to be. I'm going to show you one last thing, and I probably should have showed you this earlier, but what better time than now? When you type 2 slashes after a line of code, and then you type anything else, that tells the interpreter, the thing that turns your code into machine language, that tells the interpreter to ignore this code. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some notes for us, and I'm going to say that this is a function. So that's a function declaration. So we are declaring a function when we use this arrow notation. And then what else do we need to do? This is a constant value, constant number, really. And then I should say this is a variable. And this is a function declaration, and this is a function call. Okay. And so we do some more function calls, and then we change. I'm just going to say a note here, order matters. Okay, so we changed a variable, and then we made a function call, and it changed our results. And I'm going to say can't do this. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Okay, so that is everything for this video. I feel like this is a lot of new stuff, so we're going to have some practice so we can really understand what this is. And then we've got a project next video, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so some practice for this section. We talked about constants and we talked about functions. So for constants, I'd like you to create a constant string and add it to another string to form a sentence. And I want you to ask this question, is it okay to do this? And I want you to test that. So test if it's okay to do that. And then I want you to start thinking about what's not okay to do. What is okay and what's not okay to do with constants? And so once you've decided that you know what's okay not to do, I want you to use a constant variable in a way that throws an error on your browser console. So I want you to intentionally cause an error. So that's something we should be able to do, something we know how to do. And then in the next part, I want you to create a function. So the area of a rectangle is the length of the rectangle multiplied by the width of a rectangle. So you're going to have to create two variables and then create a function that outputs the product of two numbers to the console. So those two variables, and then call this function area. So product just means multiply the numbers together. So we should have the tools to do that. So really concentrate on that one and make sure that you can do that. And then what happens when we have a function without a function call? So in order to use functions, we also need that function call. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to run code that has a function without a function call and see what it does. And then think why it makes sense that it does that. So there's a little thought experiment there. And then finally, for the bonus, I'd like you to create a function that contains a while loop. So we're nesting a while loop inside of a function, and then have a while loop output spam followed by lol. So it'll console log spam and then console log lol, and then do that 10 times, and then call this function 3 times and observe the output. So this is just a really fast way to make spam. And there's your bonus. And once you're done with this, I got a project for you in the next video, so be excited for that.